This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I felt like I was kind of watching our team the way we came out of training camp in a way. And it's, that the break, the way we went into the break with all the momentum and the way we were playing, you take 3 weeks off. And then a big portion of your team goes and plays on other teams. There is going to be a little bit of a probably chemistry issue at times. And so we just have to get back to our system, everything, we do, and our identity of the way we've played for most of this year. And so I'm not this isn't faulting the guys whatsoever. Their intentions are all well and good, but I think our team's in a little different situation than a lot of teams that didn't send a bunch of Olympians.
It's a good point. John Cooper speaking honestly about the situation and where his team is right now. 11 games in the NHL tonight, including Tampa Bay and Minnesota. That might be the marquee one. It's a little later tonight. We're going to have that for you on Lightning Radio. I am Greg Linnelli, along with the radio voice of the Lightning, Dave Mishkin. Steve Versnick's our producer. We are live, so we'll be able to take your questions as they come in at Bolts Radio. If you want to get them on X, Conor Geekie recalled. A lot of people excited and want to talk about what that means. But typically, partner, if he's getting called up, that means a couple of players are going to be out of the lineup, at least in the short run. And that was confirmed yesterday as well. When we talk about Gonsalves and James, and beyond the next couple of games, we're just not sure, but that's why Geekie, in large part, is up here and see what he can do.
Yeah, you're taking James and Gonsalves out for sure for the next couple of games, as Coop said, and James is on IR. James is not going to be a short-term situation. I think the best case scenario, without knowing exactly what's going on, because apparently he's going for additional testing, is that this is not, to me, the best scenario is this is not season ending for Dominic James. And I'm talking about full season. Like Lightning go all the way to the Stanley Cup final into June, and James isn't even available for that. That would be the worst case scenario. Anything other than that, to me, is a better scenario. Obviously, you'd like it to be short term, but based on how that injury looked, and Coop alluded to the fact, bet on the over, basically, in terms of timeout. That's the way things have gone. I think we're holding our breath that it's not the worst case diagnosis, which would be something torn and probably out. If this were October, maybe it might be a different story, but we're not in October. We're in March.
Yeah.
So if James is able to come back at some point this year, speaking personally, that would be a win, because I'm going into this with my eyes open to the fact that we may be looking at a season-ending situation. And I have no knowledge about this. I'm just talking about how it looked, how he left the ice, the fact that we haven't really gotten a full diagnosis yet or a prognosis from the coaching staff. They're taking their time to figure out maybe what to do. But we should get clarity soon. We know he's on IR. In the short term, he's not playing tonight. Gonsalves does not seem to be as severe, but he's going to miss the next couple of games. He was pushed by Rasmus Dahlin feet first into the boards. So that's an awkward way to go into the boards, but he didn't practice yesterday. We'll see. So if you take two forwards out, and they were only going with 11 forwards the other night, you had Douglas and Sabourin as the healthy scratches. You could put both those guys back in to get to 11 forwards, but you're recalling Geekie. I foresee Geekie playing center, probably on the fourth line, and maybe not. We don't know for sure. There's an optional to the rink today. One reason I'm in the hotel, people are watching on the video stream. But if they run the lines like they did in practice yesterday, which I had Bjorkstrand with Point and Kucherov, Sorelli, Hagel, and Gensel, Gord line. Then you had a fourth line of Sabourin and Douglas. There's no center on that line. So Geekie, who's had a good year in the AHL, was named to the All-Star game at the AHL level. He has been over a point per game with Syracuse. He's got 37 assists in 47 games with the Crunch, 51 points. Center is his natural position. It would make sense then to presume he comes up, plays center, maybe with Douglas and Sabrin, maybe with one of the two, and they stick with the 7 defensemen. But they're going to need forwards because, it doesn't, at the very least for the next couple of games, they're going to be without Gonçalves, according to Coop, and with James going on IR, it's going to be longer than that, at least a week, but, in all likelihood, probably longer than that. So without saying more about the James injury, we just don't know. I'm just giving you the tea leaves would indicate that this is not going to be a short-term situation. And based on kind of what Coop was saying between the lines when he met with the media yesterday.
And now you get into this debate a little bit. Geekie comes up. Is he somebody that needs to be back in a top 6 to be effective? Or
they could do that. I mean, they could put him in the top 6 as a winger.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Bjorkstrand. Bjorkstrand has been playing on the 4th line with another forward. That's the line with 2. They could do that. But then you're without a center for the 4th line, and you're rotating in, whether it's Point or Sorelli or Gord or Gergensen. They have guys who can take faceoffs, right? They could swap in on the 4th line, which they've done before. But I think that they may start Geekie out, centering that 4th line with a winger, either Sabrin or Douglas, and going 11-7. We'll find out tonight.
We will. And going against a good team tonight, too, in a place
Very
where they've
team.
struggled to win games,
Yes.
as you pointed out yesterday. So you have some of those challenges, and the Lightning not playing particularly well since the break, as John Cooper alluded to. So there are some things there that sometimes adversity builds that character again and builds that structure, and maybe that's something they're going to have to rely on a little bit more, knowing that you have a couple of injuries, you aren't playing particularly well, and you're playing against a good opponent in a building where you haven't had a ton of success. So all that kind of factors into what type of game are we going to see tonight? And I think the question is, partner, what type of game does John Cooper want to see from his team? I think that's because I think a lot of times they'll say, if the Lightning are playing the way they're capable of, the other team's going to have a say, but we'll feel confident we're coming away with a win. And so tonight, for Lightning fans and for us here talking on the show, what are some of the things we're going to be looking for tonight in the Lightning's game that we're going to feel good about that's going to give them a chance to win compared to what we've seen the last 2? And I think that's going to be starting with puck management. I think some of that's going to be in their own defensive zone. They're just a little bit off. You can talk about individual players that you think are causing some of those problems, but I think, to John Cooper's point, they had a break. It feels a little helter-skelter because many guys were playing in the Olympics, and getting back to that groove that they were in before is going to be paramount to their success, I think, moving forward.
Well, what you want to see is a tight defensive performance.
Right.
And I would take that even if the result isn't there at this point, because really it's more about getting their game back in gear. And they've been very loose. They've been very leaky. Tons of scoring chances against the last couple of games. And even in the Toronto game. They had the puck more in the Toronto game, so Toronto was able to do less. But don't forget, Nylander had a couple of breakaways. They gave up some chances in the Toronto game, too, that when really they're on top of things, there might be the odd chance here or there. But Toronto had some looks, right? Toronto had some looks late in the game when they pulled the goalie. So the Toronto game was way better than the Carolina loss and the Buffalo loss, but even the Toronto game wasn't quite maybe to where they want their standard to ultimately be. At this point, I would take a performance like the one that we saw when they played Toronto, though, because it was better than the last 2. The last 2, they've been all over the map defensively. So puck management is part of it. Rush coverage, which is sometimes tied to puck management, but sometimes it isn't, is part of it. So think about the Josh Norris goal that made it 2-0. That wasn't a turnover. It was off the rush that Buffalo scored, but they brought it up the ice, right? So it's not like the Lightning turned it over and were, scrambling to get back into position. The turnover would have prevented the rush chance against. This wasn't a turnover. This was just they were not in the right position. Buffalo sliced right through them,
Right.
fed the guy at the side of the net, and he one-timed it in. So sometimes rush coverage is tied to puck management. Sometimes it isn't. What I mean by that is a chance against on rush coverage has its origins in you not managing the puck well and turning it over in a bad spot of the ice. Sometimes a rush chance against has nothing to do with that. They just brought it, the opponent just brought it up the ice, and you didn't get in the right position to close them off, and you gave up a rush chance. Both have been problems. The Lightning have allowed guys to get to dangerous areas. Think about the Tage Thompson goal that made it 4-0. I mean, this is the most dangerous player offensively. He gets the puck kind of to the side, and he's able to walk right in front of the net, jam it in.
Fair point.
So, I mean, these are the sorts of things that we are seeing right now from the Lightning that are just uncharacteristic. I think Coop's point is an accurate one. He would certainly know, but he's like, it's kind of like when we came out of training camp. They were just disjointed out of training camp. They started the year very badly defensively, and some of that was due to, we mentioned this at the time, a lot of their regulars had not gotten into preseason games because of the whole mess with the Panthers. That basically negated some games played for some of the regulars because they kept them out, and they didn't play them in the first week. So the regulars were coming in without having played a lot in the preseason, haven't gotten their reps, hadn't played with each other. This is a little different in that the Lightning had the 8 Olympians, but those Olympians were all playing with different players. That's what Coop said at the end. We're in a little bit of a different boat because we had all these Olympians playing. It's not that he's saying they're tired. He's just saying, like, they're used to playing with other players. Now they're coming back and playing with our players, and then we have this other group that hadn't played. So, I mean, I guess that sounds a little bit like an excuse because every team has to go through it. Minnesota, for example, is a team. Minnesota had Olympians. They had Olympians go deep. I mean, they had Faber, they had Boldy, they had Quinn Hughes. Both their goalies played for Team Sweden, which didn't go into the Final Four. Wallstad, the Lightning have never seen him. He was the backup. He was, I think, the third string. But they had Markstrom and Gustafsson. Gustafsson did get into some games for Sweden. He basically backed up Markstrom, but they were over there. They played. So, I mean, Minnesota is maybe a closer team to what the Lightning are going through. But this is my way of explaining, using Coop's words, what he is seeing, which is they are not in sync as a team. And when you're not in sync as a team and you're facing a really good opponent like Carolina or Buffalo, they can slice you up. And that's what happened. We can get into Minnesota. They're an interesting team. They're a top team in the West. They're a top team in their division. They have, I would say, a chance, probably an outside chance, but a chance still at getting into first place, which would take away a first-round matchup in all likelihood against Dallas, which is also an excellent team, and allow them to have the other. So there are 3 top teams in the Central: Colorado, Minnesota, and Dallas. 2 of those teams are going to play each other in the first round. And presumably, if the surviving team is going to get to the conference final and it's a team in the 2-3, they're going to have to beat both of the other teams. If you assume first place is going to get through, it doesn't always happen, but for the sake of this discussion, let's assume that if Colorado finishes first, Colorado is going to get to the second round. If you're Minnesota, now you have to go through Dallas and Colorado. If Minnesota can get to first and take care of business in the first round, they only have to face one of those 2 teams because they'll be playing each other in the first round. So there's some motivation there. I still think it's going to be a tough ask to catch Colorado. I know that both Minnesota and Dallas have closed the gap, but, I mean, Colorado, I think it would require the Avs to really go into a massive slump, and we're not seeing that. They just won a game last night on the road. I think they were in California. They were in L.A. L.A.'s really struggled coming out of the break, too. Fired their. But Minnesota is an interesting team in looking at their metrics and their stats, and I'm trying to figure out why they're as good as they are. There are reasons, and I can give you those reasons, but it's not like they're one of these teams that's in the top 5 in every major category.
Pretty good goaltending, right? I think collectively.
Good goaltending. They're good defensively, but they are not top 5 defensively. They're good offensively. They're not top 5 offensively. Now, how much of this is kind of tied to the Quinn Hughes arrival. How much have they improved offensively since Quinn Hughes got to this team in mid-December? I mean, that's not a full season, right? They have gotten better offensively since Quinn Hughes arrived. I can say that with full certainty. And they had a bad first month, which maybe skewed some of their stats. But we can get into them in a second. I know you brought up the point about what do we want to see from the Lightning tonight against a team that, is one of the top teams in the NHL in a building the Lightning have historically struggled. The Lightning are going to have to come up with a much, much better defensive performance than what they've showed so far.
I would agree.
Coming out of the break.
It feels like, what's the difference? I don't know. I feel like over the years when I have looked at Minnesota and their team, and maybe it's more of a perception, not a ton of high-end talent.
That is no longer the case.
I don't think that's the case. So you ask, what's the difference? And I know Hughes hasn't been there all year, but Kaprizov is an incredible, dynamic player. I mean, he is. When you talk about superstars, I think he would identify as one. And some of these other teams you and I have discussed that have good teams, but maybe we're looking at them. Do they have game breakers? Maybe not. Good players, really good players.
Yeah.
I think Minnesota has two of them. I mean, Hughes on the back end and Kaprizov up front. And I don't know, partner, if that's part of this. I mean, Matt Boldy's a good player. We know that. He's a heck of a player. Faber's a really good defenseman on the back end. We get that. I feel like they could probably use another high-end player. There's been some talks about them being active at the trade deadline to do that as well. I think they have some good players to complement those 3 or 4 I just mentioned to you. And maybe that's the difference. Because it felt like over the years, they were a team made up of a lot of those really good players, but not a ton of superstars. And I'm wondering if that's where we can make the distinction. And again, too, I think they're having some goaltenders who've been pretty good. Although I feel like Minnesota's had some good goaltending over the years.
Yeah. Minnesota's had a good team through the years. And really through the years, I'm talking about like the last 4 to 5 years. Yeah. I remember being very impressed with them in the 2021-2022 season. The Lightning saw them. They hadn't seen them the year before, Greg, because that was the year where you only played within your conference, and the Lightning didn't see Minnesota in the playoffs. And I remember being super impressed with they had a heavy line of Eriksson Ek, Foligno, and Jordan Greenway, who's no longer on Minnesota. He's in Buffalo. They were a heavy team. They were able to play the sort of game where they had the puck a lot because they won a lot of puck battles. I think they were just really solid and structured. Dean Evison was their coach at the time. Now, he's since been fired, went to Columbus, and he just got fired there, but I think he's a good coach.
Tough business.
Tough business, yeah, because they didn't – what Minnesota's problem has been, both in that 2021-2022 season and since, they keep losing in the first round of the playoffs.
Right.
They can't win a playoff round.
Right. Now,
some of the opposition they've had has been, excellent, and so they've run into a problem in that regard that they can't get over the hump. And again, this year, if they're in the 2-3, they're going to have a very tough first-round matchup. Having said that, their team this year is a little bit different because you mentioned the 2 guys that you consider the high-end guys. Kaprizov, who, by the way, is a goal away from becoming their franchise leader in goals scored, which tells you how good he's been because he's in the middle of his career.
Does it tell you how good he's been, but also maybe they haven't had...
Fair point. So the previous guy was Marian Gaborik, who was their first superstar.
Yeah, he was a very good player.
And he didn't play his whole career in Minnesota.
No.
He got moved near the end, but what's the number? 219 goals. So both guys have 219. Kaprizov's 220th will make him the all-time franchise leader. He's got 34 goals this year. So he's having another terrific year. He is a very high-end player. He's extremely skilled. Okay. Then Quinn Hughes, I think people understand, he has been and continues to be one of the top offensive defensemen in the NHL who plays a ton. A ton. He's leading the entire league in average ice time. He's actually up from his previous years where he's been high in Vancouver, but he's over 27 minutes a game. And I think that number has been bumped up a little bit since he got to Minnesota. But I'm going to include the other two guys that you mentioned as really important members of this team. Matt Boldy has 35 goals this year, Greg.
You're right.
That's tied for second in the entire NHL. So maybe it's time we start referring to Matt Boldy.
That's fair.
As maybe not a superstar, but he is a really important player on this team. He was an important player for Team USA in the Olympics. Scored the first goal in the gold medal game. I think he finished with 4 points during the Olympics, 2 goals, 2 assists. He is a key guy who plays a lot for them. And Faber is their blue chip defenseman. Brock Faber has 13 goals this year.
I know.
So,
I know.
Quinn Hughes
Yeah.
is dishing out assists left and right. Like, he leads all defensemen in assists. Some of those came in Vancouver. A lot have come since he came to Minnesota. But Faber's their goal scorer on defense. Quinn Hughes only has 5. I say only has 5 goals this year. He's got 50 some odd points. He's got 59 points. He's got 5 goals and 54 assists. Again, some of that came during his time with Vancouver, and he had a 4-assist game against the Lightning earlier this year when the Canucks beat the Lightning in Tampa. But Faber already has set career highs in goals, assists, and points. Here is kind of the issue potentially for Minnesota, and it may back up your contention that maybe they need to go find someone at the deadline. The goaltending has been solid, and you have those 4 guys. But Faber and Quinn Hughes play a lot. They play a lot. Faber is at about 24, 25 minutes a game, which is high for defensemen. And then Quinn Hughes is at 27. And they're really front-loading their offense with Kaprizov and Boldy. So this feels to me, at least offensively, like a very top-heavy team. They might need some scoring depth, but there's no disputing that they are a good team. Their defense core is good. I mean, they still got Jared Spurgeon. They got Jake Middleton, who's talking about their D core. Like, those are 2 really good defensemen, kind of behind Faber and Quinn Hughes. They just don't play as much as they have. Eriksson Ek is a terrific center still.
He's a good
probably
player.
More of at this point, a defensive center, but he can score.
He's a good player.
He was in the Olympics too. So, I mean, I like their team, but it feels to me like the damage that they do offensively is kind of zeroed in on a few players, which, look, a lot of teams are like that. Not every team can throw like 8, 9 players onto the ice who are all contributing a fair amount. But this kind of goes to what you often say when you're picking holes, I'll use that term, with teams like Carolina or back in the day, the Islanders. You're like, do you have a game breaker? Do you have somebody who can make a play? Are you missing that pop? Well, Minnesota has the pop. The question is, like, do they have enough beyond the pop to help them win a playoff series against probably an excellent opponent in the first round?
And I feel like, did they picked up Fabry?
On waivers.
Waivers. So, an offensive guy, maybe that on a micro level speaks to what they're trying
There was a reason why St.
do.
Louis put him on waivers.
Well, that's 100%. I mean, that's what you have to look at. But I think, when I look at their team, I didn't realize they still have Spurgeon, good defenseman.
Yeah, he's
more of
had
an offensive
injury
guy.
problems, but yes.
You can see some of the pieces there, but then, it's probably fair to say they look at Vlad Tarasenko as one of their top 6 forwards. And I don't know if Tarasenko is the Tarasenko when he was humming along for the Blues.
He's not. But, I mean, he did have, the cup run with Florida, right, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Last year he was in Detroit. He's actually eclipsed his goal total from last year when he was in Detroit. I think he's got 15 goals this year. So he may be an asset for them on the power play. So he can still do damage, but he's not the same player that he was.
No. So I think that's why
career.
I think that's why you're seeing Bill Guerin maybe try to be a little bit more aggressive, maybe a lot aggressive.
We should mention, by the way, we went off the air yesterday, and Steve had informed us because we were like, doesn't Quinn Hughes need a new contract? He's got a year left. So he is near the end of a contract, but they can't renew him until July 1. I'm sorry. And maybe they'll do that as soon as July 1 occurs.
They've got a lot of good pieces. I think you hit the nail on the head. The depth actually may be more of an issue than anything else. They actually have some dynamic players in all facets, by the way.
They're a bad face-off team, too, by the way. So the Lightning saw
be
the worst
interesting,
face-off team in the NHL, Buffalo, on Saturday. And the Lightning, I think they did end up winning the face-off battle, but it wasn't a huge advantage, but they did win it. Minnesota is second to last, but it hasn't hurt the Wild. Now, they have Nico Sturm, who's a very, very good face-off guy. He's a little bit lower than where he's been in some other years, but he's still good. Like, he's at 54%. And I want to say that Eriksson Ek has been good, but maybe this year he's having not as great of a year in the circle. Yeah. So they're kind of in the same boat as the Lightning. Like, they probably would like to find a face-off guy, but it hasn't hurt them to this point. The other thing I'll mention about Minnesota, and I don't really know what to make of this, except to say that this is a little bit of a weird stat because it's so much more in favor of Minnesota than any other team in the NHL. They get so many more power plays than penalty kills. So there are a couple of things to this. So remember, the Bruins are on the other end of the spectrum. The Bruins have the worst special teams time differential in the NHL. They're at almost minus 80 minutes. And remember, in the Stadium Series game, they took, let's be honest, bad penalties. So if you're a team that takes bad penalties and you have that in your DNA, or maybe you try and push the envelope a little bit so you're more likely to be called for penalties, but you're also not drawing power plays.
Right.
But it's really taking the unnecessary penalties that will push up your shorthanded time. Minnesota is the opposite. Minnesota doesn't get called for a lot of penalties, which you might say, okay, that's a team that doesn't really put itself in a bad position to take penalties. But often when you see that, those teams tend to play a lot of 5-on-5. Like the low penalty kill number teams tend to be lower in power plays too. Minnesota isn't. Minnesota has taken some of the fewest penalties in the NHL, but they have the second most power play opportunities in the NHL.
Yeah.
And their power play is ridiculously good. So they're at 26% on the power play. They are at plus 78 minutes special teams differential. The next closest team, I think, is in the 40s. So they are more than 20 minutes better. Special teams differential is add up your power play time, subtract your penalty kill time. You like to be plus. The Lightning, I think, are plus, but they're like single digits. They're like 3-4 minutes. So they basically are even. Most teams, some are a little above, some are a little below. There are a few teams that are, way above or way below. Boston is way below. Minnesota is by far the leader. And when you're at plus 78 minutes, another way of saying it is they've been on the power play 44 more times than they have been shorthanded. And their power play is at 26%. And you got Kaprizov, and you got Quinn Hughes, and you got Boldy. You've got power play guys that can be very effective. That has been a huge benefit, I am guessing, their team, because their penalty kill is not great, but they've helped their penalty kill by not being shorthanded a lot, right? So they've been able to offset that. They have been a very, very good special teams team just based on that stat alone. So I think it would be important and imperative, actually, for the Lightning to try and avoid going to the box tonight, because this is a team that gets a lot of power plays. And they're dangerous on it.
And that doesn't go to the penalty box.
Well, the people who are really into the weeds on the analytics can take a look. I mean, I don't have the sorts of power plays that they're getting. Are they stick fouls? Are they goading teams into are other teams losing their top and getting roughing minors when they're not?
Yeah.
Who knows? Usually teams that don't get called for a lot of penalties, though, tend to be positionally sound, so they're not taking a lot of the stick fouls. But that's a very broad generalization. I haven't seen Minnesota this year, so I don't know why these stats are where they are. I'm just telling you what I saw today, and it seems to be a very impactful stat in that how are they scoring? Lots of power play chances, lots of power play goals. How are they keeping the puck out of their net? Keeping games either 5-on-5 or they're the team getting the power play.
It's always interesting teams who I don't want to say rely on their special teams, but certainly take advantage of those opportunities more so than maybe where they are 5-on-5, what that looks like come playoff time. Because I think I've often said to you, I think teams who do rely on their power play for a decent amount of their scoring, that's a risky proposition heading into the playoffs for the simple fact that I think the game gets called differently. And you're just not, what was called in the regular season might not be called in the postseason. I mean, we've seen a number of times in the postseason the official not wanting to impact the game, and they swallow the whistle for a whole period. And that could impact a team that's very skilled that relies on it.
And 5-on-5, they're okay, but they're just a smidge over 1 in 5-on-5 ratio. In other words, they've scored more goals 5-on-5 than they've allowed, but it's not a huge gap. Where they have pulled away in terms of goals for, goals against is in their special teams play. But they are where they are for a reason. They're a good team. They did sweep the Lightning last year with a different looking team. I mean, they didn't have a Quinn Hughes last year. But I remember both those games, which were played fairly early in the season. The Lightning lost both of those games where they were tied in the third period and lost in regulation. Now, the game in Tampa, they gave up the goal to break the tie fairly early in the third. I remember the game in Minnesota. We were coming out of the last TV timeout. The game was 3-3, and they gave up a goal off a faceoff and lost and got 0 points. So, I mean, Minnesota did sweep the Lightning last year, and we were talking about tough building. In franchise history, the Lightning have only won 3 times in Minnesota. 3. That's it. Now, it's not like they played 60 games here.
Yeah.
I believe the record is like 3-13-3 or something like that, including last year's loss. But that speaks to how much they've struggled to get wins in this building.
No doubt. Questions that we want to take from our audience. Leaf Dog says, wearing my Geekie jersey right now. I'm hyped that Geeks got called up. I think a lot of people are excited to see how he's going to respond. Let's see here. We've got 3-pack. Super excited to have Geekie back. Do we think he'll slot in the top line with Point and Gensel, or maybe the second line with Hagel and Cirelli?
We don't know. I said at the top of the show, I think he's going to play center on the fourth line because the Lightning need a center for their fourth line. But he may go into the top 6, and they'll bump somebody else down and rotate a center on the fourth line. That's if they go 11-7.
Do you think at this point, if you're going to bring up Geekie, you need to see him in that role a little bit more?
I don't know. I mean, that is kind of saying, well, it's time to call up Geekie, and now we want to play him here. They're calling up Geekie because they have injuries. If James and Gonsalves had not gotten hurt in the last game, Geekie would not be coming up. That's no offense to him, but I mean, that's been their intention this year, to let him do what he needs to do at the minor league level and keep him focused on that. And it seems to have helped him. Like, he's having a great year in Syracuse.
Thomas from Lute says, could Geekie be a showcase for the trade deadline?
Geekie is up because the Lightning are shorthanded at forward and they need reinforcements. I mean, I have no idea. Geekie could be somebody that other teams are interested in as part of a trade just because he's a young blue chip prospect, and that is separate from whether he's playing in the AHL or the NHL. Other teams have eyeballs on players.
Yeah, for sure.
Whether they're playing the NHL or minors.
Is this a showcase? Don't know about that. Are other teams looking at Conor Geekie? Yes. And that's no inside information. That's just, I think, any team out there, if you're looking to make a deal, it's probably going to include some sort of package with younger players involved. Geekie's one of the Lightning's more talented players who is not on the NHL roster, per se, and teams find that super valuable. So we'll see how that plays out. Mikey says, any thoughts on who Tampa Bay needs at the trade deadline? Toronto and Florida both seem out now. Is the time to full go for it and deal with the consequences later?
Well, that's putting it in a rather extreme light. Julian is aggressive. I don't think Julian would say, we're going to go for it now and deal with the consequences later. I think Julian would like to be aggressive, but also keep the Lightning's window open as long as he possibly can I think he's made some savvy moves through the years to get younger players who are NHLers who are growing into even better NHL players. Brandon Hagel would certainly be a great example of that. But I'll just say this. Julian has been aggressive as GM of the Lightning and creative and fearless about making moves. Now, the creativity part of it is there are fewer opportunities and options to be creative now that we have this new rule with only one team can absorb part of a contract. But I think Julian is going to look to improve the team. And also he's got injury concerns now at forward that we don't know the exact timeline, but he may need to address some holes that are longer term.
It's a fair point. Mytho says, man, I really hate the thought of Conor going to the fourth with Douglas and Sabrin. They have to mix that up. Last time they played together, it was just meh, in my opinion.
Well, that would be if the Lightning go 12-6.
Yeah.
I actually think the Lightning are going to keep an 11-7 lineup configuration because they have the 8 defensemen. So if Geekie goes to the fourth line, he would be playing with one of those two players, and Sabrin has been the guy who's next up. Sabrin didn't play last game because Cirelli returned. So if you have a line of Geekie and Sabrin, if we're just running out this ground ball, how would the fan feel about Geekie playing on a line with Sabrin and Hagel? Or Geekie playing a line with Sabrin and Gergensons? Or Geekie playing a line with Sabrin and Gensel? I mean, that's what you might see with a rotation. Or Geekie goes to play center, but maybe they throw center on that line for a shift. And Geekie goes to left wing and plays with Cirelli and Sabrin. They may use Geekie in the top 6. They may, like Bjorkstrand right now is playing with Point and Cooch, which would be left wing for Bjorkstrand. Maybe, they swap those two, Geekie and Bjorkstrand, for a shift or two.
Right.
Kind of depends how the game is going, right?
Fair point.
Talk about being aggressive. Coop is pretty aggressive about mixing up the lines.
He is.
Things are not going to his liking.
Thaw says, Helter Skelter is the best Beatles song, period. Go argue with a wall.
Is this relating to some conversation that
I love that question. Well, I think I said Helter Skelter in.
Oh, okay.
Kind of when Mythos mentioned, or Thaw mentioned that. And in my life, by the way, I think is the best Beatles song, but I think they've had so many. I mean, it's Helter Skelter. I love the beginning. Love the beginning.
I'm a huge Beatles fan still. I know not everyone is. Yeah. And I'm not a huge Helter Skelter fan. So whoever
Skelter.
That, well, look, I understand. Yeah. That was later Beatles for sure. But yes. I like Beatles from all. Yeah, it's funny, like they had a fairly short run. They didn't before they became famous. They were together for several years and played. But their time together was, less than in the public eye. Yeah. But when the time they got super famous, it was less than a decade.
A lot of good songs, man.
I mean, like 1963, 1964, maybe 62. I'm trying to remember when their first album came out, and they were done by 1970. So, I mean, they were the volume of great songs they produced is just, mind-boggling.
What the Steelers were to the NFL in the 70s, the Beatles were to music in the 60s. I'm not sure.
Well, you could say what the Packers were to the NFL in the 60s with Lombardi.
There you go. Mythos also says, serious question, what are the thoughts of sitting Hedman for a game? Is that even realistic? I just think when he is on the ice, the D looks slower, turns over the puck a lot. I'm not fully blaming Heddy, but what are the thoughts there? I know he's the captain, and he's likely not going to sit, but we can't sit here and say Hedman has been good this year, and the injuries plus age, it's just a lot of toll.
So, first of all, and I said this after the Buffalo game, I thought probably the last 25 to 30 minutes of the Buffalo game Hedman looked as good as he looked, in quite some time. Certainly before the rash of injuries, took him out of the lineup. So kind of the question is, what do you need to do to get Victor Hedman back to the level that he wants to get at? Do you sit him or do you play him?
Yeah.
You play him.
Agreed, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way to look at it. I think that's the way the coaches are looking at it. The fan is looking at it as this is the fan speaking, I am not liking what I'm seeing from Hedman. Take him out. And I think the idea is Hedman is working his way back into game flow, game speed. The worst thing you can do is take him out. You want him to get more reps, more touches, more game action. But that's one person's opinion. I guess two, because you said you agreed with me.
Yeah, I think you let him work it out. I think players of that ilk deserve it. And as I said before, this is all in preparation for the playoffs. And unless he still has an injury that you feel like sitting him is going to help him get back to being 100%, you can kind of do that here and there because of where the Lightning are in the standings. But I think in the most part, most people would agree if a player's in a funk, particularly one of Victor Hedman's pedigree, they eventually figure it out, and you just got to keep grinding and work at it. It's a great example, by the way, of even Hall of Famers struggle. And it's a really hard game, and sometimes even top-end athletes go through stretches like this. So you let them play it out. Unless there is an injury that we don't know about that's still impacting him, the coaches do, and they feel like, maybe we sit you for a couple of games just to make sure you're back. But I have no way of knowing that. So it's a good question. It's one I think a lot of people are asking. Ranger says, do you think Heddy is healthy enough that it's time to stop protecting his minutes and get him more reps? So you can see kind of where the audience
that's the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Well, now that is more of a question about really what the first fan was asking, which is you have a rhythm that you've established and kind of set responsibilities that you've established that have worked. And really specifically, we're talking about Radish on the first power play. And Radish and Moser as a pair. They've done very, very well as a pair, and Radish has excelled on the top power play unit. And as a righty shot is open for the one-timer on the pass from Kucherov. And he scored, 9 power play goals this year. So now I'm going on the other side of the ledger, like, why would you want to mess with that?
One of the things that you can do when you have a nice complement of defensemen on the back end who are playing at a pretty high level is that playing time can be limited for everybody involved. And so if you feel like Hedman isn't playing up to his capabilities to this point and you're not going to sit him, you can limit minutes. I mean, that is part of it. I mean, but you and I were talking about that a couple of days ago when they had all these defensemen still coming back, and it's like, okay, well, how are they going to figure this out? Not only who's playing, but whose minutes are going to be impacted.
Yeah.
If you go 7 defensemen, those numbers may be impacted for sure. So that's maybe one way, not that you're protecting a Hedman or anybody in his case, but I think you can say, look, give me 16 to 17 really good minutes rather than 22, 23. And that's just an example. Anthony says to Rangers, he's not looking very good. Why do you want more reps? Because
that's how
some
players
work themselves out of it.
He's missed how much time?
Exactly. I think that's the part. And look, we don't have the answer to that. Only John Cooper and his staff have the answer to where he's been. TK says they need tweaking. I'll keep ringing the bell on a face-off specialist. I don't see if it's a center, a winger, or the mascot, or I don't care if it's a center, winger, or mascot. That said, let's not forget that this team is first in the Atlantic.
Yes. Look, there's a lot of concern on the part of fans. We're hearing that about how the team has played generally since the Olympic break, although we had positive comments after they beat Toronto. But certainly in the last 2 games, we are in agreement. There should be concern. For John Cooper to come into a post-game press conference and talk about how disappointing it is, like he doesn't always lay things out and lay things at the skates of his players that way. He did.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sit well with him. And the Lightning know they need to correct it. But let's not lose sight of the fact that they've only played 3 games since the Olympic break. And I know we live in a world that sometimes feels like it moves 100 miles an hour. But the reality is that, they have 24 games left.
Yeah.
They are not in jeopardy of really, getting to the point where we'd be concerned about them missing the playoffs. Now, if they continue losing, and we can address that if the 9th place team starts to get closer to where the Lightning are. As it stands right now, as we've talked about, they put themselves in a fantastic standings position to get to 96 points. They only need to win 8 games down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
96 may be enough to get in. They win 9 games, that's 98. Every additional win is going to get them closer to basically they're in.
Right.
Okay? So I would just exercise, if you can, some patience about where this is going to play out. Allow this team the opportunity to dig themselves out of it, as they did after the first 6 games. I know they went 1-4-2. I liked their 7th game more than the first 6. Now, one thing you brought up, I think it was on yesterday's show, Greg, was about the lack of practice time. And I pointed out, look, they have a practice. They had a practice on Monday. They have a practice scheduled tomorrow. There is something to, though, having several days of practice together, lined up together. Now, they had that at the end of the break, but they didn't have their full roster. Players were still in Italy. Some had been eliminated, but they hadn't come back yet. They came back. They got a day off. So what they had in October, after they lost to Columbus, they had 3 days in a 4-day span. They had 3 days of practice before their next game. They lost that next game, but they played a lot better. That sort of an opportunity is not going to present itself. They do have some practice days, fewer practice days. That was what you brought up.
Yeah.
And they don't have a stretch of 2, 3, 4 days to practice until really the regular season ends. If they're getting ready for the playoffs, they'll have a couple of days to get ready. But they're going to have to an extent, figure this out on the fly. But, I mean, what you've seen from this team in the first, let's say, 55 games, or after the first 6 or 7, in the next 48 games, why would you believe that they can't do it?
Yeah.
I'm asking the fans. It's just difficult when you see them not play well and you're like, fix it. Well, okay, they're going to try and fix it. They know they need to fix it. They're going into a building tonight where they're facing an excellent team that has also struggled, by the way, coming out of the break. We didn't really talk about that for Minnesota, but for what it's worth, historically has been an awful, awful building for the Lightning. They've gone into this building playing lights out, lose. They've gone into this building playing poorly, lose. They've gone into this building playing mezza, lose. They outplay Minnesota, lose. They get outplayed by Minnesota, lose. They're in a tight game with Minnesota, lose. It has been every which way under the sun through the years. I've been here for a lot of these games, and I can tell you what has happened. So this is a tough place for them to play historically. Maybe they can buck the trend. Maybe these last 2 losses will serve as kind of a splash of cold water in the face.
Sure.
But Minnesota is coming off a couple of bad losses too. So they are going to be motivated to try and turn things around. They had a little bit of a goalie steal. They won in Denver in their first game. I think it was Gustafsson. I can go and look up whether it was him or Volstead. It's a W. He says it with a V. That's how he prefers
Volstead.
Volstead, yes.
I like that.
But then it was a back-to-back, but they lost in Utah, and then they came home and they lost to St. Louis at home. Minnesota's not going to be happy with losing at home to St. Louis. St. Louis is on pace certainly to miss the playoffs. And the Wild want to try and make a run at first place here and go into the playoffs playing well, kind of like the Lightning. Look at how many key players on their team went to the Olympics. A lot. So they're trying to figure things out too. I know I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
Gustafsson was in the net for the Colorado game.
Okay,
if that's what you're referencing.
And he's had a good year.
Yeah.
But he helped them win that game. Colorado brought a lot of pressure in that game. So, at some point, I believe the Lightning are going to get back to the form that they've showed most of this year. Right now, it hasn't happened. But that doesn't mean that you freak out and, sit this guy, bring that guy up, trade him. Like, that's just not the way Julian operates, but it's also probably not the best way to proceed anyway. Fortunately for the Lightning and for the fans who follow the team, I think I say this with all due respect to the fans who are like, I don't like this, Hedman needs to sit, right? That's not a Julian decision. That's a John Cooper decision. But, they're very measured as a group about how they handle things. And I think that's what you want from the people making the decisions about who's in, who's out, who's going up, who's going down, who are we acquiring. Very little is knee-jerk. But they will look to correct what has been, a troubling trend in the last couple of games. They know they're going nowhere if they don't improve defensively.
I think that's fair.
That's stating the obvious.
Sherry says, is Geekie still waiver exempt?
Yes.
He is. Zeke, what are your thoughts on being the most penalized team in the league? Impact and if minutes versus number of penalties is causing this.
My thought is that is not a stat that tells you anything, because being the most penalized team in the league is not the same as being the most shorthanded team in the league. The Lightning are not even close to being the team with the most shorthanded opportunities against, basically. And we talked about the special teams differential. The Lightning are right in the middle of the pack. The Bruins are the team that has taken bad penalties, essentially. The Lightning's penalty minute total is up because they've had a bunch of game misconducts. They've been in some rough and tumble games, but usually those game misconducts are going on both sides. So there's no power play as a result. Maybe that's not what Zeke was asking. Maybe Zeke is asking about just getting penalty minutes. But I think, like Jake Gensel argued, got a 2 and a 10. That's 12 minutes in penalties from the last game. That's going to add to your total, but it didn't really. Yes, the 2-minute minor was impactful. But usually when you get a 5 in a game, it's not really, other than the player is out for the rest of the game, it's not hurting the team in terms of being shorthanded.
Fair point. Old St. Nick. I like that. Come on. Still absolutely confused how Sabrin is holding an NHL spot over Chaffee, who is rocking 43 points in Syracuse.
Well, I think they've been impressed with how Sabrin has played in limited minutes. I actually misspoke yesterday when I said he played a little bit more in Carolina than he had against Toronto. He actually played less in Carolina, but he had a nice assist on a Hagel goal. Chaffee has NHL experience, but Sabrin is a very well-seasoned pro, I think, who can handle playing limited minutes, which is kind of the role they have him in right now. He is tough. He can fight to the extent that they want somebody maybe in the lineup that can do that, understanding they're not playing Douglas as much. That's not really Chaffee's game. It's also the question of Sabrin does fit on a fourth line. If you bring Chaffee up, are you going to play him on the fourth line? Kind of what you were asking about Geekie. I'm asking honestly. I'm not asking like rhetorically, but I mean, that's a choice that you would have to make. If you're going to bring Chaffee up, is it in Chaffee's best interest to play in an elevated role? To the fans' point, he's rocking 43 points in Syracuse this year. So that might be part of the reason. But that's ultimately a Julian question. One that if he was asked directly, maybe he would answer, but maybe he wouldn't.
Steve, you want to get Julian on the show here? We have to ask him a few things that are pretty
Why is
important.
Chaffee still in the minors? Actually, if you ask Julian a question about, like, what's the decision, like, what does Chaffee need to do to get back up? If you ask Julian a question like that, he would probably answer it. If you ask Julian a question, why are you keeping Sabrin over Chaffee, direct like that, he probably would find a very polite way of answering the question without saying exactly, maybe what the
I wonder
fans
if
wanting to hear.
If one of those answers would be, who do you want me to take out?
Well, they're saying sub Sabrin.
No, but I mean, like, if we ask Julian,
yeah,
look, why isn't Chaffee up here? Why isn't Geekie? It's okay. Who do you want to replace them with? Because up until the last couple of games, and look, that's not going to change the opinion. I mean, this team was humming along. Are you going to tinker with a team that's won 20 of their last 22 games? Whatever absurd streak they were on? No. So I think that's also part of it. I don't think Geekie and Chaffee were bad when they were up here. they didn't do enough to hold on to that spot. And they had other guys who were breathing down their necks who deserved an opportunity. And those guys got it. And at least in the Lightning's eyes, they have not given it back.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's go down to Syracuse, play really well, and probably the way you're going to get back is if there's an injury.
And no yo-yo. Look, I mean, Geekie went down for a bit last year and then came up. But, I mean, it probably wasn't easy for him to go down there when he had expectations of being up this year after he put in a lot of work during the offseason. Talking about Geekie now. But, like, it's hard to argue that this time down there hasn't benefited him. Just as an AHL player, over a point per game, all-star, playing a lot, playing in a variety of situations, playing his natural position. I mean, We'll see if ultimately it benefits him. Like, when he comes up more permanently, and who knows, maybe that's now. I don't know. But whenever that point is, if his NHL game is more polished from his time in the AHL and not being yo-yoed, not that he was ever really yo-yoed. He kind of was up last year. He went down. He went up. That was it. I guess that's one yo-yo. But, like, if they had used him as the guy when they had injuries at forward earlier and brought him up, they got healthy, sent him down, got injured again, brought him up. Injury guy came back, sent him down. Like, they wanted to avoid that. Now they're short. He's had a great year. And again, like, it doesn't seem like, Paul is going to be out for a little bit longer. I guess he started skating, but starting to skate is not nearing a return. And it looks like the James injury is not going to be short term based on what we talked about at the start of the show. So this would be a longer, potentially, recall for him. Now would be the time to bring him up. You've played, 47 games in Syracuse in a row since you went down. Now bring that to the NHL. As opposed to 20 games or 27 games that were like 5 games in Syracuse, 2 games with the Lightning, 8 games with Syracuse, 4 games with the Lightning, or he scratched a couple, back to Syracuse. You know what I mean? He got these 47 games in a row, unless he missed some due to injury, which I don't know. But, he's played mostly regularly. I think that probably benefited him. The continuity of it I'm talking about.
Game is at 9:30 tonight, we think. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
It'll be after that. Yeah, yes. I think the face-off is officially 9:47.
We're going to have a long pregame, so if you like listening to more of these conversations, we're going to have it with our panel, Chief, Ben Pierce, Eric Erlinson. I'll talk to you. Are you doing the game solo tonight?
Solo
tonight. So you and I will talk, and we'll begin that at 9 o'clock. And we'll have the last call afterwards. So what the heck? Big party for us tonight on the airwaves. And then we're going to tape tomorrow, but we're going to recap this game. And hopefully it's a W in a place that has given the Lightning fits over the years. Partner, great job. As always. We'll talk to you tonight. And then, of course, in this setting tomorrow. Thanks to Steve Versnick. We appreciate him and all of you for listening. You guys are great. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch right here on Lightning Radio.